Hello, magical experimenters. This is Taylor Ellwood, and today I'm really excited because joining me is Elise Oursa. Is that how you say your last name? Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Got that right. And she is a friend that I met in the last year online in the midst of all this crazy pandemic stuff. And aside from the fact that she's a wicked awesome magician and does some really interesting stuff with tarot. I love her snarky sarcasm as well. So, I just thought I'd throw that in there because we've chatted occasionally. And yeah, go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about who you are and where we can find you on the web, and then we'll leap into the more fun stuff.
Yeah. So this is the bit where I'm supposed to have a really smooth kind of mission statement, right? And
That's right, but you're already handling it so well.
right. So yeah, so what do you say? I'm a magical practitioner. I guess my flavor of magic is witchcraft based. I spring from the more witchy traditions as opposed to ceremonial magic, that kind of thing. But I'm a professional tarot reader, tarot teacher. I run an online daily tarot practice, which you can find on Facebook, called Coffee and Cards. So if you're wanting to just get your hands dirty and practice, we're on Zoom every single freaking day.
Wow, there you go. There's dedication.
Yeah, really happy to be here because like we've had some interesting discussions. I'm a big fan of your books as well.
Oh, well, thank you. Hey, I'm always surprised when people are like, "Oh, hey, I really like your stuff." Really? That's cool. You know, but anyway. All right, so let's talk a little bit then about the tarot, because you actually have a deck that's coming out in the next day or so, and we'll have the link in the show notes once it comes out. But tell us a little bit about that deck and
Yeah.
what your process for creating that and some stuff along those lines.
Yeah, so the deck is called the Blood and Ink Tarot, and it came about this time last year. I did a couple of road openers at Imbol, one with Tecate, one with Bridget, and it was completely unplanned. I just channeled the whole freaking thing over the course of a week, like literally just sat down over a weekend and did the entire major arcana, and like it came from somewhere else. Like I make no bones about that. Like it came from somewhere else and came through me. It is deeply magical. I feel like every single one of the major arcana cards are it's a bit of a there's a bit of a grimoire in there. Um, and I've kind of sat on it over the last year, going through various reiterations of getting it printed and different just getting to grips with the printing process. But I've finally decided I'm going to be releasing over the next day or two, or starting pre-ordering for 100 copies of A5, so that's postcard size, beautiful paper. It's just lush. It's really lush, and it's all going to come with a bit of a sigil charged that I've been working with the deck over the last year as well. So that's people have been bugging me for ages, like when's it coming out? When's it coming out? So yeah, tomorrow the link is ready to go. So tomorrow I'll start accepting pre-orders on it, and then so that's like beautiful kind of that size large format cards, and then the smaller deck will be coming in a couple of months. I'm kind of waiting on something to come from China,
Okay, cool.
which is not fast.
Well, yeah, especially in these pandemic times, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, good. Well, first off, congratulations, because anytime you create something and put it out there, that is something to be celebrated, and so that's awesome. I'm so
Oh,
happy
thank
for
you.
you.
Yeah,
It's
thank you.
interesting that you mentioned, that it came from somewhere else and essentially you
Mm,
mediated, because I think that a lot of times, with any kind of art or books or what have you, um,
mm,
there is that process of mediation. And
mm.
a lot of people think, oh, so and so, they wrote the book, whatever else, but they don't necessarily realize that there could be a very real communion with the spirits. So let's
Yeah.
Talk a
Holy
little bit
shit.
about that. What kind of spirits were you working with? What do you feel was being mediated through this process of creating this deck?
Whew.
I know I don't come up with the easy questions, do I?
I'm reluctant to say where I think it came from because it like, yeah, I'm not going to say where I think it,
Okay.
maybe some people won't buy the deck. I'll put it this way, like, the strap line is the devil made me do it. Okay, so then it comes to what do I mean by the word devil, I suppose. But it, as I say, it was like these two road openers at Imbol. One was with Hecate, which was really crossroads dirt
Hmm.
sorcery,
Right.
chthonic, dark in the woods. And then
Underworld.
yeah, and then one with Bridget, which we involved walking on hot coals, so the fire and everything of the season. And I can't say that the deck came because I was working because of a specific spirit I was working with, but I think because of those two things, I asked for specific things in the road opener. I had no idea that a deck was how these things would manifest. Like, honestly, no clue. But that, that's what happened. So it feels like something found me. Like, it found the pathway, and it found someone who was in the right space to hear it, to accept it, and to move through it. And there was also like, I drink, but I don't drink that much. Like, I was, holy shit, I was like turned into an alcoholic for the 2 weeks that I was doing this. Like, and so I was really aware that Jesus, whatever this is, needs the alcohol. Not me needs the alcohol, but the spirit needs the spirits in order to move through me. So that was an interesting. I know we talk about spirits needing specific kinds of offerings and specific energies on the altar or whatever, but that was, a thing that I needed to put in my body for the spirit to move through my body. It very much wasn't a thing here speaking to me. It was a thing moving through me
Hmm.
physically. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that brings up a really good point that, this kind of stuff, that when we're creating something, it's not always based on is what we might think, like, oh, okay, I'm just going to go and
Mm.
sit down and create this. No, I mean, there may be certain conditions, or in this case, like, that alcoholic influence loosened you up a bit more so that the spirit could work through you more directly,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
could,
Perhaps that's it.
yeah, and of course that
Yeah.
might not be it at all. I mean, I don't, I'm just throwing that out there as an example, but I
Mm.
think I always think it's kind of fascinating to look at a magical working and recognize. I mean, one, whatever notion of control that we have about magic or anything else is really very limited and often gets blown on its hinges. I mean,
Mm.
like you said, you did those road openers and that's the form that it showed up. That wasn't necessarily what you anticipated or anything like that, but there it is. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of times, people, in my experience, and certainly I've been this person myself, that, sometimes we get so caught up in our own expectations and stresses and pressures around how
Mm.
something ought to show up, that we ignore the way that it really is showing up. And so it's a good lesson because, you know the way
Yeah.
something manifests in your life, it manifests the way it's going to manifest, and that's not always in the way that you think it would.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I think people, you have to get out of your head. You have to get out of the, oh, it's supposed to look this way. I'm supposed to make this much money. I'm supposed to achieve this by this age. And like when it turns up, you just have to get out of the way and allow it to work. Do you know that great Elizabeth? It's old now, but Elizabeth Gilbert, that great Elizabeth Gilbert YouTube video about creativity,
Hmm.
and she's quoting, oh, was it Lou Reed? Maybe it's Lou Reed, and he's in the car, he's driving, and he starts getting an inspiration for a song, and he's like, oh, holy shit, what am I going to do? I'm driving. And so he kind of like stops the car, and he's like, look, stop. You can't do this now. I'm driving, come back later. you know, so it's just like an example of putting the boundaries in for the inspiration or the creativity to move through you in an appropriate way. But that worked for him, but he's a master, right? So he knows how to appropriately get out of the way.
Yeah, there's definitely that. I mean, I think it's kind of interesting too, because as a creative, I write pretty much every single day, and
Yeah.
I definitely have a set schedule at this point. I now that I'm doing this full time, and it's interesting. It's like, okay, once I hit that certain point of the day, I'll write for a few hours, and there you go. But like any other time, I'll
Mm,
be kind of like, okay, I'm doing my own thing, and just come back when I'm ready.
yeah.
but but again, I mean, like with magic, it's a bit different than that, because sometimes you're drawing in stuff that's not even under that much control. It is kind of like,
Yeah.
okay, you're mediating these forces, and they're coming in with a very specific agenda, and that's certainly how I feel
Mm,
sometimes with some of the stuff that I end up writing. Like, I have some books that I write where it's pretty much like, okay, you're going to write this, Taylor, because this is something that needs to go out into the world. And then
mm.
my zombie apocalypse fiction, which just for me is just a lot of fun, and I'm writing it for fun, and there's no spirits or anything else saying anything about that. They're like, yeah, go have fun and
Yeah.
be ready to come
Yeah.
back and write the next magic book. Okay.
I mean, I think you have to have a good understanding of your own range, what you're energetically capable of, and kind of a good understanding of where your center is, in order to channel the stuff. Otherwise, I mean, it does happen, doesn't it? Spirits turn up and people get completely blown out. But it's certainly not my goal in life to be that person. My goal in life is to be, to be pretty solid and centered, so that when shit hits the fan, it can move around me. Basically, I can hold my center.
No, I would agree. That's generally my goal as well, and I think that's important too. I mean, you have to find that balance in your magical
Mm,
work, because sometimes it's easy to go off the deep end, but you've also got to know when to pull back and
yeah,
find that balance and to center and ground yourself. I mean, otherwise you set yourself up for instability, and that's no fun, because then it
yeah,
ends up creating a lot of chaos in your life.
yeah,
Certainly something I can attest to from this last year. At one point, where it was like I needed to know when to take a break, and I didn't take a break until it was
yeah,
forced on me to take a break, and then it was just kind of like, okay.
yeah, sure.
So I totally get that, and I think that that's good. It's solid advice, and definitely recommend it. But speaking of that, like right now, you were telling me before we started recording that you're also doing Zoom sessions in regards to tarot readings every single day. So that's pretty intense. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so our group is called Coffee and Cards, and what happened back in April, because we were in lockdown, and to be perfectly honest, I was really on the edge of sinking into deep depression with it. And so I put this call out on Facebook, and I said, hey, like, who wants to 8 o'clock in the morning, who wants to meet on Zoom and read cards and have coffee with me? And a bunch of people came, and they kept coming every day. And we're not meeting at 8 o'clock in the morning every single morning. Now we have other times as well, so because we have people in America that are joining, and the group is just grown and grown. And like it's gosh, Tyler, like I'm really really proud of what we've done, because not just because it's giving people a place to practice tarot in a really inclusive space. There's nobody saying, oh, that's not right, that's not the way you do it. It's a simple formula. We come with questions, and we read cards, and so it's for people of all abilities to practice. But I'm really proud that like I really see that it's given, over this period with the pandemic, it's given people a routine in their day. It's given people community, friendships, or some like really deep friendships that have grown through it now. And I've just seen people come on so far with their tarot reading, because I think people, they're nervous to read online, or they're nervous to read for other people, and we just create this space where everyone feels comfortable to just have a go, and it breaks through that holy shit, how do I string these cards together into a coherent, meaningful message for the person I'm reading for. Um, so yeah, it's fabulous. It's really fabulous. I absolutely adore all the people that are coming. It's kind of spun off into courses as well, which is going well too.
Yeah, you have a confluence course or a fluency course, I
Oh
think it
yeah,
is.
fluency. Yeah,
Fluency, yeah.
yeah. So that's
It's
running at the moment. I do it every once in a while, like with just 8 people, so a small group. Um, and my God, I feel like with tarot teaching, the thing that prevents people from taking the teachings and actually progressing with it is a lot of them are lacking kind of live practice. So I combine teaching with the live practice and give everybody a chance to just get playing and get going with the cards.
That's awesome. One of the things that I find interesting with the tarot is that, a lot of times people get into the stereotypical thought that, that reading the tarot is really just about divination. And it is. I mean, I'm not going to say it isn't, but I
Mm,
also think that there's some other really fascinating aspects to it, like being able to, for example, apply tarot toward active spell work, using the reading
yeah,
itself as an active magical working and
yeah.
things like that. So, um, how do you merge tarot and the tarot reading with your other spiritual practices and your magical practices, if at all?
Yeah, no, I do actually. So, yeah, I'm very into merging it with spell work. So I do a few different things. So one, I think which most people do is kind of check like with the cards, like, okay, what's the probability if I work this in a certain way? What's the probability of this being successful? What do I know? What do I need to know about this situation? But then I also like I have a couple of decks that I suppose you could say they act as servitors, but for me, it's just more like they have spirits in them, like actual, real, visible, moving, living beings. And I think plenty of times I will, in particular, ask for a spell, and I will take from the cards ideas for materia, sigils. Like I'm really not necessarily with a drawn sigil, but maybe like constructed out of different materials and stuff. So I'll take from the cards ideas for the material bit and what it should look like of a spell, and the I'm also really into like the repetition of words. So most of my spell work involves mantra of some kind, and so I'll take from those cards like the words will come to me of what needs to be chanted, what needs to be to cast, what needs to
Hmm.
be said to cast it. Um, so that's one thing. One thing I do, and the other thing that I do is, especially with the major arcana, is really just kind of evoke those energies that I need to embody in order to to move the spell over. Like if it needs some emperor, like, so I'll just really bring that character in.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think one of the things I've always found interesting too is I mean, the tarot very much do allow you to tap into, some people say archetypes, spirits, whatever, but they allow you to
Mm,
do that and to work with them. Then of course you also have that interplay of the actual reading itself. I think that,
yeah.
like when I read cards, it feels like, okay, it's not even just an act of reading, it's really an act of engagement. Like I'm setting into place this specific pathway that I can choose.
Yeah.
I may
Yeah.
end up choosing not to go down or whatever else, but I mean, it still kind of sets it into place and it allows you to explore it. And then it takes you somewhere
Yeah.
outside of the normal bounds of space and time, because you're using that medium as a way to just go out there instead of staying in the here and now.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Yeah, for sure. It's always. I know I was reading something yesterday about this, like, are you actually, if you read the cards and let's say you predict a certain outcome with the cards, are you therefore creating that outcome? Is there a danger of that? And I don't see it that way, because I think we as human beings always have agency in our decisions, and maybe the cards show you what could happen under certain circumstances as long as everything stays the same. But it's up to you. It's up to you to pull that thread and not choose to pull a different thread. And I think if you feel that you don't have agency, then that's that's a personal problem you need to look at. And we're all disempowered at some point. I don't mean to be judgmental of that, but you shouldn't feel disempowered because a bit of cardboard tells you something. It's your fate, it's your life.
Well, and I think you bring up a really good point there, because I mean, yes, we all feel disempowered at one point or another, but at the same time, that is a subject of perception to some degree as well. And so if you're perceiving that, okay, these cards are telling me that my fate is locked in stone, well, I mean, how much of that is really just you looking for a way out because you don't want to be responsible for your choices?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's that dilemma of, like, should you ask the cards should questions, because, like, who's giving you the answer? Should I do this? Should I do not? Should I not do it? Is that coming from your perspective? Is that coming from other interested parties' perspective? Like, whose should is it? So I tend to think it's always best to ask questions like, what could happen if I do this, or what are the factors involved in this? What more do I need to know if I follow this route?
Yeah, I mean that's my own approach too. It's more of an exploratory, like, kind of a what if scenario, because it's helpful then, and then you can make an informed choice about whatever it is that you're going to do, or at least a somewhat more informed choice. I mean, at the end of the day too, you don't know until you're there what's really going to happen. You get an idea, but at the end you have to live it, and until you live it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I mean, I honestly, as I say that, and I mean, it's just because I think sometimes people get so wrapped up in what they think something ought to be, or whatever else, and they forget that, like, okay, but at the end of the day, until you've actually taken the actions and done whatever you've done, it's all a what if scenario, and you can live in that fantasy, or you can engage in the reality.
And I think people need to know it's like, you can want something different. We get trapped in the things that we think we want. The things that we think are like a very narrow window of possibility in our narrow lives. But we really need to be reminded, like, you can want something else. You can want something else into existence. You don't have to walk yourself into a corner and stay there.
No, I mean, you just have to be willing to deal with the consequences.
Yeah. Like a hangover.
Right, or whatever else. Like, if you're gonna if you're gonna go and I mean, like you said, you can want something else. It's just you have to deal then with the consequences of it, and that's kind of the thing I think that a lot of times people forget as well. Like, oh yeah, okay, great, but here's this then.
Yeah, both the consequences and the requirements. It's not enough to want something. You also have to put that into action.
Yeah, you got to put into action. You got to, and that's true whether it's magical or mundane actions.
Yeah.
I mean, or a combination thereof. But it fascinates me sometimes, because I think, people get so fixated on results. Like, I want this result. Well, that's great. And have you thought out what that result is actually going to get you in terms of consequences? What are the ripples? And of course, consequences aren't necessarily negative. I mean, they can be good consequences as well, but it's still worthwhile to actually put some forethought into what you're doing, because once you've done it, then you can't cry over. You can cry over that spilt milk, but you can't do much else about it other than clean it up at that point.
Do you think there's always ripples, like, consequences? Do you think, like, if you achieve something in magic, you also give something up?
I think that just from my own experience that there definitely seems to be that definitely seems to be the case, and from observing
Mhm.
other people, because I mean, you're changing, people have this notion, and this is what I observe with a lot of magical practitioners, and so it's a critique I have. They have this notion that, okay, I'm going to go and do a result, and they treat the result as being out here.
Mhm.
It's external to them. But the thing is like any action, any choice you take in your life is going to have a ripple effect. And it's
Mm.
not just a ripple effect out here, it's also in here,
Mm.
because you're
Mhm.
changing your identity.
Yeah.
The person you were is not the person you are, is not the person you will be. And
Yeah.
I think it's worthwhile to consider that. And a lot of times I think people duck out of that because they want whatever it is that they want, but they don't consider, okay, well, this is how it's going to change my identity. This is who I'm going to be as a result. And then there you are.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, I'm all for doing magic. I mean, I do magical practice
Mhm.
every day, and
Yeah.
and stuff, but I'll be the first to tell you, I have done stuff and had consequences come out of it, and been like, man, that was stupid. And or man, or wow, what kind of a situation did I put myself into? Or wow, how did I affect these people in this way that I really didn't want to? And
Yeah.
majority of the time that isn't the case, but there's
Mhm.
no such thing as not doing something and not having the potential for negative consequences or positive. I mean, but that's the thing, is that's life. It's
Yeah.
not even just magic, it's life. You open your mouth
Yeah.
to say something, and well, whatever those words that come out, you got to deal with it. Once you've said those words, you don't have control
Yeah.
over them anymore.
Yeah. 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 For sure. Yeah. I think people don't consider that when they make changes, it changes your identity as well. I don't go so far as in feeling that you have to make a sacrifice in order to have a successful magical act. I see it more like, yeah, you throw something into the ocean, and it's not necessarily completely totally predictable how that result is going to land, and then, as you say, it kind of ripples out and influences things in various ways. But that's, I mean, that's a completely, I know in lots of practices they do feel like, I know there has to be, you have to sacrifice something to the gods or to the spirits in order to, you have to pay them in a particular way in order to win again, and I
I don't
just like,
agree with that either. I don't think you always have
yeah,
to sacrifice something. I just think that you have to recognize that there is change, and
yeah,
change isn't necessarily a sacrifice, but it's change. It's like you don't do a magical
mm,
working to do it, just to, we're not doing magical workings to be the same. We're doing it for a reason. Like,
yeah,
I mean, that's
yeah,
just the
yeah,
truth of it. And let's call it
yeah,
out for what it is.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, you do it because something's fucked up and you need to fix it. It's just like you're kind of aiming at what you think the fix is, I think sometimes.
Or because you have long-term designs for your life and you want things to turn out a certain way, and you've
Yeah,
decided that's what you want if you want to be more proactive. But either way, yeah. You actually teach some courses on magical workings and spell casting and stuff. So let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, we kind of already are
mm,
anyway.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I did, I've got on my website, I did a webinar last, when was it? May, in My Secrets of Spellcrafting, it's called, which was fabulous. And I guess like my approach with it was I wanted to like break down the anatomy of a spell and kind of what you need to do to get yourself ready to cast a spell, how to formulate your, let's say the word intent. I know it's it's a word that people have problems saying, but it's hard to find about another word.
Welcome to the
Yeah.
English language.
Hello. Yeah, how to formulate your intent. When I talk about requirements, actually, that like moving your language to calling it a requirement. And then what goes into like powering the spell and pushing it out. So like my intent really is to take something that anybody could apply, regardless of what tradition practices they're coming, something that just kind of breaks it down to the bare bones. And it was really, it was like an hour of like, okay, here's a little bit of my daily practice. Here's a little bit of my thoughts around what a spell is. And here's a little bit of how you can put it into action. And let's have a big discussion, because I like to get people talking. So where we're at with that is I've got a few people who I'm teaching. I call it my midline practice. So this comes from, I'm also a craniosacral therapist, so it comes from my craniosacral training. So I'm teaching that at the moment to a very small group, and hoping probably in the next month or so going to roll it out it's the kind of thing, like, you can't really do it like an hour class. It's a practice that you have to build up over time. So I'm not sure exactly what the best way to do that in this crazy digital world is, but we're going to give it a go.
Nice. Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting how, like, this whole digital world that we live in now, for at least the rest of this year, probably too, just by the basis of where things are going, just how much, you have to adapt to it and everything else, but then, like, it forces you to get creative with your problem solutions. So I get that.
Yeah, and the thing, like, the I don't know, like, when you have a group of people together, for me, it's so much easier you can partner them up and you can teach them. It's the basic practice of like how to figure out how to determine self versus other, and it's both, like, it's a foundational practice for relating to other human beings, and to be, being able to be sensitive and to feel where they're at. But it's also applicable to being able to feel the field around you. So, the spirits and beings and nature and everything that's around you. So when you have people in a room together, it's really easy to get them kind of playing with their perception, widening their perception out, seeing what the difference is when it's a bit more narrow, a bit closer to another human being, because you get this immediate kind of bio response from the other person. And it's just much trickier on Zoom. You can do it, but it's Zoom both kind of scatters things a bit, and also amplifies it in very, very weird ways. So it's a hard thing.
Well, and the other aspect to it too is that, I mean, there's something visceral about being in person with somebody,
Yeah.
and being able to talk with them and everything else. And then you throw in spiritual work, and like, spiritual work is about connection. So, like, if I'm doing a spiritual working, a magical working with somebody, can I do it long distance? Sure. I mean, I've done long distance workings for, with people across the world for a good portion of my life, but there is something to be said for actually getting together with somebody and doing the work together, and having that intimate connection.
Yeah, exactly. Hearts and
Occurs.
nervous systems start to align, and there's just this beautiful entrainment that happens between the systems, the fields of the two people. But yeah, but what I'm really doing with it is I'm taking these practices that I learned as a body worker and as an energy worker, and this is meant to be used for healing, for hands-on healing. But what I discovered was it's actually a practice that opens you up to psychic phenomena, to being able to see and communicate with spirits as well. So this is where I'm going with it. I mean, there's plenty of spiritual practices to do this for people, but with magical practitioners, this seems to be one of the main things is like, I want to see spirits and I can't see spirits, and I think it's a matter of just being able to understand what perception is for you individually and personally, what it feels like in the body, that it's not necessarily a technicolor demon walking across your living room.
Well,
It's very subtle.
It's more subtle, and there's a level of experiential data that you're taking in all the time with your body
Yeah, exactly.
that can
Yeah.
play a role in what you're experiencing with a spirit, or for that matter just in general with magic or other things. I mean, I think we have a very sight focused culture in the West,
Yeah.
in part because of the television and in part because of other things, but there's other engagement with the other senses, and being able to steep yourself into that, it necessarily involves learning how to be more comfortable with your body, which is again another interesting facet with Western culture, because Western
Yeah.
culture tends to be body phobic. At least the Northern European and and the American culture, seems to be,
Yeah.
from what I've observed. But um,
Yeah, you touched on an interesting, like I always use this metaphor with the midline practices. You're you're attuning your body so that it becomes a satellite dish. This is the visualization of the whole body as a receiver for for the information that's coming in around you, whether that's from spirits or other people or energy forms, thought forms, trees, even. It's the field. What's there, and you're just attuning yourself and your perception to be much bigger than eyes and hands. To be attuned to this vast, flowing, huge field of information that's at play.
yeah, and when you can do that, it opens you to a world of sensation and experience that you've otherwise just kind of blocked out. I mean,
Yeah.
one thing I like to say to people is like, when's the last time you really opened yourself to like your sense of smell? Most
Yeah.
people don't think
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
smell, but
Yeah.
like smell is such an integral part of how we taste food, of how we experience the world around us. And so
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
being able
And
to connect with that.
yeah, and it's also like one of the like the primordial scent, isn't it? Like the olfactory bulb is it's very, very porous, whereas the eyes, you have your eyes here, and then the optic nerve travels to the back of your head, and the olfactory bulb is just, it's here, and it's just open. So we have so many primal memories that are associated with smell that they're pre-verbal. We'll remember a smell and the emotion that goes with it for our entire lives, and not necessarily remember why it evokes that emotional response. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I think that's fascinating work that you're doing, and needed in this world, especially in our digital world, but that we're in now. But I mean, even when we get out of it, it's needed, because I think that we've in a lot of ways we've become so focused on the abstract and the intellectual that we've forgotten that there is real value in being in the
Yeah.
material world, and in using
Yeah.
and in working with spirit through the material world, because I mean that's kind of the advantage that as manifest beings we have.
Yeah.
The spirits want to interact with us because we've got this form.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I also like I'm a big believer that I chose to incarnate as a human being. Like I chose to be here. And so like practices that are too much about trying to get somewhere else, even um trying to become a god, not to name any names, like those sorts of things. It's like, no, like, I've only got maybe I've got 40 more years to be a human being. This is where I'm meant to be for now. Let's engage fully with this present material world that we're in.
Exactly, because it's a miracle in and of itself, and you don't know
Yeah.
when you'll have that again, so enjoy it while you got it.
Or at least feel it while you got it.
Feel it while you got it, right? Yeah. So I mean, no, that's absolutely true, and
Yeah.
it's kind of again, it's kind of one of those things where I think we sort of take for granted what we have until we start to not have it. Well, why not just start appreciating it now?
Yeah. 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 Yeah, suck the marrow out of life. That's the
I like that. Practically vampiric.
it's completely original as well.
Now I have this image of you, like, cracking this bone and there you go. So I want to circle back to something that you talked about earlier, which is, when you're talking about, the practice of magic, one of the things you talk about, instead of using that word intention, is requirements. And I like that. So let's talk a little bit more about that, because that's a very, I think that's a really good way to express it. Like, what are the requirements, in order to get this?
Yeah, so I've been in a couple, involved in a couple of communities where there was a lot of languaging around shifting from I want or I need to I desire, and moving your life to a desire-led life. And then through another teacher who was mentioning, who was talking about requirements, and it's just like, yeah, like, desire is hot and juicy and immediate, but require is actually like, no, this has to happen. This is, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So like, what I would do if I had a magical intention, let's say I had a magical intention to increase my salary by 10% or something like that. So then I would add, like, maybe that would be my desire. Okay, then I would itemize that into requirements, like, what things do I require in order for that to happen? Okay, so, I require a car to get to a better job. I require a new CV, a new resume. I require a new suit. I don't know, all of the nitty gritty project management of the magic, like breaking it down. And I think it's just a beautiful languaging around it, because then when you accept that, like these things are absolute requirements for you to live your full life, then there's no negotiating with it. You don't have to be like, beat yourself up over, like, oh, but I can't afford that suit, or all of the tricks that we play in our mind that prevents us from really going for something. It's like, no, this is the law, this is the rule, this is what has to happen. And it's just a beautiful way of, I guess, focusing the will, aligning the will, or aligning yourself towards that goal, or towards the ultimate goal. I think you and I would probably work something like that similarly. Like, you would probably do different bits of spell work for each one as well. I'm big on kind of project managing.
I am too. I mean, I'm very process oriented. So, it's like, okay, if
Yeah,
I want this, then what do I have to do to get it? And
yeah,
what are the practical bits that have to be considered in order to get
yeah.
there?
I also, like, I would look at all of those. I break them. I mean, I think most magic can be broken down into, like, practical magic, into like a spell of increase, decrease, or stasis. Okay, so you either want to increase a certain thing, decrease a certain thing, or maintain and hold a certain thing in the position where it is. And so that then gives you, instead of like, oh, what's the best way to to get a new job, it's like, okay, well, I have to decrease laziness. I have to increase study. You go through it in that way, and it gives you a much more clear idea in each individual component. Okay, what could I do that's within my within my toolkit, to work each of those steps.
Yeah, I like it. Those are some really valuable tools, and I would definitely recommend anyone watching this to try and use those, because I think it's another practical way of looking at your magic and saying, okay, like, what are the things what do I need to do to get this to work?
Yeah, yeah. And I think also, like, sometimes looking at a situation, sometimes we have to get rid of something. You have to create a hole so that the other stuff has a place to land in your life. So yeah, instead of constantly focusing, like, on achievement based goals, it's like, okay, well, like, what needs to be removed before I can step into that new place.
Yeah, something I've kind of been thinking about lately and exploring more is also kind of a value-based approach. Like, what are the values? Not just like what's the goal, but what are the
Mm-hmm.
values that underline this goal? And am I living according to those values, or am I just trying to get something for the sake of getting it, but it doesn't really reflect who I
Mm-hmm.
really want to be?
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
which
yeah,
I mean, again, is kind of one of those things where a lot of times we get focused on the desire, but desire is transitory. I mean,
yeah.
great, you have a desire and then you have it met and then it's gone. It's like what, but what's really, where's the joy? Where's the joy and the purpose behind it?
Yeah,
Behind that desire, I mean,
yeah.
you can like you can want a really good drink or good sex or whatever else, and that's great, that's
Mm.
desire, but it's not the same thing as actually bringing joy and purpose into your life.
Yeah, yeah, that's gorgeous. Do you have a good sense of what kind of person you want to be? And
Sometimes, most of the time, sometimes it needs some work. I'm not, again, I'll be the first to tell you, I am by no means, I by no means have it all together all the time. It might seem like it to some people, but I definitely do not. And I've sometimes had to work some of that stuff out the hard way.
yeah.
But I own it. And I mean, I think that that's what's really important. Like, for me, I would say that like the last few months has really been a good opportunity for me to explore like what really brings me joy and purpose, because like here I
Hmm.
am now doing what I want to do, writing full time, creating classes full time and everything else. And it was kind of interesting. I was kind of faced with this realization of, well, like, how does what I'm doing actually bring me joy and purpose? And you would think, okay, well, that's
Mm,
what you wanted, Taylor, you should know that. Well, I didn't know that right then and there. I had to really reflect on it
mm,
and reconnect with that, because in my situation, I was working a full-time job I hated and just wanted
yeah,
to get out of that job. And well, I managed to get out of that job, but then all of a sudden it was kind of like, okay, well, now what? And even though I had what
yeah,
I wanted, I was faced with that cliff of now what? And that's a very
yeah,
scary cliff to come across. So I think, that's where it's kind of led me down this path of like a value bait. Like, what are the values that I'm choosing to live now? What's the
mm,
long term of this going to look like? If I want to do this for the rest of my life, how am I going to make sure that it's bringing me joy and purpose, instead of just, like 5 years down the line, I'm like, well, I want this, I want that, because I don't want to do this anymore. And I
yeah,
mean, don't get me wrong. I
yeah,
mean, we do have changing circumstances. Sometimes you just grow out of what you were doing, and that's fair enough. But I think that when people get so focused on results and desires and stuff like that, they sometimes forget like that deeper underlying, like what's the joy and the purpose
yeah,
underneath that. Because
yeah,
desire is not the same thing as joy and purpose. Desire is a
mm,
very transitory experience in my experience. Again, that's just me speaking, but like, okay, I want this, well, I got it. But
mm, mm,
it's consumer and capitalistic in a lot of ways. It's like, okay, I see that thing on Amazon, I want those books, well, I
mm.
got the books. And for a moment, I'm Simon Dida. If he's watching this, he'll laugh. I'm Simon
Hi,
Dida.
Simon.
Hi, Simon. And and I got my books, and now I want more books, and now I want more books. But what's
Yeah,
the joy and
but
purpose beneath that?
yeah, and I think there is a place where desire meets up with joy and purpose, because I think that there's desire and then there's the deeper thing, and it's like sometimes you have to allow yourself desires and you get through all of the surface things, right? And then underneath that there's actually a much more vulnerable desire that all of the surface desires have been hiding or filling that void. You've been filling the void with your books, Simon. um, what's the deeper thing, Simon?
Sorry,
but you know
Simon, we couldn't resist.
but you have to allow yourself to align yourself with your capacity for pleasure and with your capacity for desire in or and open yourself to, okay, this is the surface level, We have to, the joy and purpose, I think, is completely aligned with desire, but there's that joy is a beautiful, I mean, how can joy not be aligned with with pleasure?
Oh, for sure. And I want to make that clear. I'm not saying it isn't, like, in terms, I
Yeah,
just think that sometimes people get focused on one thing and forget about the other. And you've
yeah,
got to find that alignment, because when you find that alignment, that's when the juices really start flowing. That's
yeah,
when it comes together. And
yeah,
otherwise,
yeah,
you
yeah,
find yourself where it's like, well, I wanted this, but now I'm miserable.
yeah,
In the moment, it satiated me. You become a hungry ghost, to use the
yeah,
terminology of in Buddhism, like, where you got a little mouth and you've got that big belly, but you're never satisfied.
yeah, 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 yeah. And I don't know, like, I think of desire as well as just life force in many respects. And I'm not a Buddhist.
I'm not either, but I just figured.
Despite my friend here. Um, but yeah, and I see the value in some detachment practices, but as I said, like, I chose to be here in this freaking physical body, and I don't want to, very much don't want to detach from it.
I don't either. I like my body. I like all the experiences and sensations that are fun and
Yeah,
joyful and everything else. I think that that's, really essential. It's just like, but it is interesting, because I mean, I can just say, you'd asked me earlier, do I feel like I'm, that person? And I can
mm,
say, I mean, there have been times in my life where, I thought I wanted something, I got it, and then I wasn't really happy.
yeah,
And I came away, what I've learned from those experiences, and it took me long enough to do it, but is that, like, well, is to go deeper. What is that
yeah,
joy? What is the joy and purpose behind this? Not just like, okay, I want this, which, okay, great. Like, I can order that book from Amazon, but when am I going to read it?
yeah,
When am I going to, when is it going to translate into something that goes deeper? And so
yeah.
that's, I think, the key thing I'd put in there. But it's,
Yeah.
it is
Oh.
what it is. I mean, what's important, I think, at the end of the day, is that you just do the best you can, and
Mm.
expect that you're going to learn and make mistakes and all that other fun stuff, because that is part of the joy of living this life.
Yeah, I really like what you say about values. I think I'm gonna take that and think about it. I'm reminded of, in Greek and the Middle Ages, we had virtues like temperance and fortitude and whatever the hell the others are. But for those of us who have abandoned a kind of Christian upbringing, I think it's useful to sit down and say, okay, like, what are my values? What kind of person am I? And how, and you're just creating an anchor, a center for yourself. And I think when you're aligned, then things move around you, or they organize around you, rather than you constantly grasping and being knocked from pole to pole.
You become a center of gravity.
Yes, exactly. A planetary body.
That's right. Well, so where can people find you online if they want to learn more about your tarot or your
Mhm.
classes, or?
Yeah, I've got a website which is eliseoursa.com. I guess we'll put it in the show notes so you know
Oh yeah, it'll be in
how
the
to.
show notes.
Yeah. I'm on Facebook. I have yeah, send me a friend request. I don't have that many friends, so there's room for more. Um, and Coffee and Cards is the tarot group. That's you'll find that on Facebook as well. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on the show. It's
Yeah.
been fun to have you on here. I've been looking forward to this interview for a while now, and so I was really excited to get you on here today. And I will look forward to having you back again sometime in the future.
Oh, thanks so much, Taylor. I really enjoyed it. And yeah, I've been looking forward to chatting for a long time as well.
All
Thanks a lot.
right. Thank you.